Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Utkarsh Verma and I am an assistant professor in law at National University of Research and Study in Law, Ranchi. The module that we are going to discuss today is forms of different punishment and statutory limitation on choice of punishment. The learning outcome is aimed at understanding the following: to understand the different forms of punishment, to realize the objectives behind the punishment, to appreciate the humanistic approach involved within the punishments, to understand the statutory limitation on judicial discretion in the process of sentencing. Peaceful social order has been the aspiration of societies world over, historically as well as geographically. A society least affected by crime can be said to be on the right path in order to attain that state. However, the process for the attainment of the same has not been quite uniform. Difference in the same can be credited to the state policy concerned, giving voice to the popular sentiments. Conventionally, a wider belief in most of the societies regarding criminals has been that they are possessors of undesirable characteristics such as evilness, dishonesty, corruptibility, antisocialness, etc. Punishment has been broadly accepted to be the appropriate response for their deviant actions. It has been popularly trusted to be the mechanism to control the rate of criminality in a society. The basic reason why punishment is considered to be the mechanism is the fact that it involves the apprehension of suffering in person or in the property, which might result due to the disobedience to the rules of the society made for the preservation and peace of the same. However, the suitability of the punishment depends upon the criminal act in question. The criminal justice system all over have devised various forms of punishments to be imposed for the violations of the substantive criminal law frameworks applicable. As far as India is concerned, the Indian Penal Code 1860 remains to be the substantive criminal law framework. Although different types of punishment have been in practice, if we talk about the Indian experience in the process, Section 53 under that statute has been reduced to include punishments such as death, imprisonment for life, imprisonment rigorous and simple, forfeiture of property and fine. Now we will discuss about the different forms of punishment. An inquiry into the forms of punishment may involve the ones existed as well as those that exists. However, the present work will be focused upon the present day framework. Following are the types of punishments which find their recognition under the criminal law jurisdiction. Now, we have this forfeiture of property. Now, we will discuss that. After life and liberty, property remains to be the next dearest thing to human. Therefore, deprivation of the same brings great discomfort. Absolute forfeiture of all the property as a mode of punishment, which was present under section 61 and 62 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, was abolished in 1921, since it was not considered to be in agreement with the modern liberal principle of punishment. However, the punishment is recognized as a punishment under the present day Indian Penal Code under section 53. Moreover, this form of punishment is present under section 126 for depredation on territories of power at peace with Government of India, and section 127 for receiving property taken by war on depredation, mentioned in section 125 and 126. Furthermore, property is bound to be confiscated under section 169, wherein the public servant who is legally bound in his capacity not to involve himself in the purchase or bid certain properties goes ahead and does that. Now, moving towards the fine, the next punishment. The punishment of fine can be compared with forfeiture of property in the sense that herein also the individual has to ultimately suffer the proprietary loss. This is recognized as a type of punishment under the section 53 of the Indian Penal Code 1860. One of the yardsticks important to be fulfilled while imposing the punishment of fine is that the financial circumstances of the individual must be taken into account. Section 63 lays the emphasis on the fact that fine imposed should not be excessive. Moreover, the nature as well as the gravity of the offence is also relevant in the process. Eventually, the usefulness of the imposition of fine is one more inquiry required to be undertaken. These considerations have been emphasized upon by the Supreme Court on several occasions. However, disagreements continue as far as the appropriateness of the punishment is concerned. The Indian Penal Code 1860 may be divided into 4 parts to describe the situations wherein fine can be imposed for different offences. First, offences in which the fine is the sole punishment and the amount is limited. Secondly, offences in which fine is an alternative punishment but its amount is limited. Thirdly, offences in which it is an additional imperative but its amount is limited. And fourthly, offences in which it is both an imperative punishment and its amount is also unlimited. Now, section 137 and section 154, wherein the maximum fine are respectively rupees 500 and rupees 1000, apart from being the sole punishment of the Indian Penal Code, can be said to be the examples of the first situation. Moreover, section 155 and 156 can be said to be the examples of the fourth situation, in the sense that herein fine is both an imperative punishment and its amount is unlimited. One more important example of the situation is assault on precedent under section 124, wherein the imposition of fine is an additional imperative apart from being unlimited. There are sundry examples of second and third category. Additionally, courts can order imprisonment in default of payment of fine by virtue of section 64 of the Indian Penal Code 1860. The scope of this section extends even to the offences under local or special laws. Sections 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70 of the Indian Penal Code 1860 also lay out the guidelines for the circumstances wherein imprisonment can be imposed in default of payment of fine. However, one thing should be amply clear, that imprisonment in default of payment of fine is a punishment for the default and not an alternative for payment of the fine. Now, when we talk about that, imprisonment in cases of default in payment of fine, now as far as the punishment of imprisonment in cases of default in payment of fine is concerned, section 64 of the Indian Penal Code 1860 is applicable to the offences under IPC as well as offences under special and local laws. Under section 64, if a fine has been imposed upon an offender, court may direct that he shall suffer a term of imprisonment in excess of any other imprisonment. For default, he has been sentenced for the offences or to which he may be responsible under a computation of sentence. Moreover, the imprisonment for such default will not exceed 1/4 of the term of imprisonment fixed for the offence, when it is punishable with imprisonment along with fine. Additionally, the imprisonment for the default of payment of fine may be rigorous or simple. Also, if the offence is punishable only with fine, the imprisonment for default of payment of fine shall be simple. Moreover, when the fine is paid or levied by process of law, the imprisonment shall terminate. Lastly, section 69 of the Indian Penal Code 1860 declares proportional reduction of the term of imprisonment on proportional payment or levying of fine. Now, we have to discuss another thing, another punishment, that is imprisonment. Now, also known as incarceration. Imprisonment requires the convicted person to be mostly put into confinement in secluded premises to ensure his temporary elimination from the society. The place wherein an individual, that is a prisoner of course, is kept is not as important as the fact of deprivation of liberty. Thus, a man can be imprisoned in his own house if he is not permitted to go outside, or he may be sentenced to imprisonment till the rising of court, and the liberty of the person is thus restrained, though the person so sentenced is not confined in jail nor subjected to jail discipline. However, with the introduction of open jails and correctional homes, the element of deprivation of liberty has undergone some change. This form of punishment has been recognized under section 53 of the Indian Penal Code 1860. Imprisonment can be of following two types: rigorous Under rigorous imprisonment, prisoners are subjected to hard labor, although framers have left the decision as to the kind of hard labor upon the jail authorities. Next is simple. On the contrary, simple imprisonment is detention, wherein the prisoner is not obligated to do labor, although he can involve himself into lighter works. Yes. Now, although it is left to the discretion of judge as to what kind of punishment he wants to impose, simple or rigorous, whatever it may be, there are certain instances wherein it is not left to the discretion of the judge. For example, under section 194 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, it is a mandatory requirement to impose rigorous imprisonment in cases of giving or fabricating false evidence. Now, moving on to one different form of punishment, that is imprisonment for life. Imprisonment for life as a form of punishment came into existence when it substituted transportation for life by the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1955. These imprisonments are always rigorous. Moreover, the Supreme Court of India has made it clear that imprisonment for life should be interpreted as imprisonment till last breath of the convict. The suffix for life placed after the term imprisonment emphasizes upon the unending ordeal one has to undergo after being convicted for an offence prescribing the punishment. The very fact that it highlights the permanent status of the punishment goes on to assert the similarity the punishment shares with the death penalty. In both the cases, the person is severed from the society, especially from his near and dear ones, and is put on a perennial wait for death. Although the punishment stretches till the natural end of a convict's life, possibilities of remission are always there. The Supreme Court of India has, in the decision of Kartik Biswas versus Union of India, stated that the life imprisonment cannot be limited to 14 or 20 years unless there has been a formal remission by the appropriate government. Moreover, Section 57 of the Indian Penal Code 1860 provides that in calculating fractions of terms of imprisonment, life imprisonment shall be reckoned as imprisonment for 20 years for the purpose of remission when the matter is considered by the government. Furthermore, under Section 55 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, read with Section 432 of the Criminal Procedure Code 1973, appropriate government can compute the punishment for imprisonment equal or lesser than 14 years. However, the Supreme Court has clarified that in the absence of an order of remission by the appropriate government, neither the Indian Penal Code 1860 nor the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973 can be taken shelter of to claim remission as a matter of right. Now, lastly, the punishment which is considered to be the dreadest of the all is the sentence of death. In this form of punishment, convicted is sent to the gallows to pay for the crime committed by him. Although it has been recognized by the Section 53 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, and furthermore, there are so many offences which can be responded by the infliction of death sentence or capital punishment. Nevertheless, it is only imposed if the case falls under the category of rarest of rare. Although there cannot be any exhaustive criteria in determination of the category, mitigating factors should be taken into account in the process of sentencing, and it should only and only be inflicted in rarest of rare cases. Furthermore, the debate of for and against the very concept of capital punishment is unending. The supporters and opposers of the punishment have been and will continue to wrestle over the authority of the state to take one's life. However, the Supreme Court of India has in unequivocal terms expressed that death penalty is not unreasonable and therefore not violative of Articles 14, 19 and 21 of the Constitution of India. Nevertheless, under Section 54 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, the sentence can be commuted by the appropriate government. As far as the case of mandatory capital punishment is concerned, the Supreme Court of India in Mithu Singh has struck down the impact of section 303 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, which left no discretion to the judicial authority in the matter. Furthermore, when it comes to the special acts, section 27(3) of the Arms Act, which provided for a mandatory death penalty, was declared to be unconstitutional as it violated the fundamental rights guaranteed to a citizen. It was declared to be ultra vires and void for the reason that it curtailed the discretion of the courts in such cases. Furthermore, Bombay High Court has been of the view that section 31A of the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, commonly which is known as NDPS Act 1985, is violative of the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. In Indian Harm Reduction Network versus the Union of India, that is the 2010 case, Bombay High Court observed that section 31A of the NDPS Act is violative of Article 21 of the Constitution of India, as it provides for mandatory death penalty. We, however, reject the challenge to the said provisions on the grounds of being violative of Article 14 of the Constitution of India. Further, instead of declaring section 31A as unconstitutional and void ab initio, we accede to the argument that the said provision be construed as directory by reading down the expression shall be punishable with death as may be punishable with death in relation to the offences covered under the section 31A of the Act. Thus, the court will have discretion to impose punishment specified in section 31 of the Act for offences covered by section 31A of the Act. But in appropriate cases, the court can award death penalty for the offences covered by section 31A upon recording reasons. There are also situations where courts are provided with the discretion that either they can impose capital punishment or imprisonment for life in alternative. Section 121, 132, 194, 302, 305 of the Indian Penal Code illustrate the point. It may be interesting to note that here a mere attempt by a life convict on the life of a person, though only hurt is caused, is punishable with death. Though the use of word may in the second paragraph of section 307 apparently invests the judge with discretion in the matter of awarding this punishment, but there being no alternative punishment provided for it, it seems very doubtful with what punishment will the judge alternate the punishment of death. Moreover, sentence of death can only be executed when it has been confirmed by the High Court. Furthermore, the discretion of the judges in imposing punishment is not unqualified. They are bound by the relevant statutory provision under the Indian Penal Code 1860 and the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973. Although the substantive criminal statute of the country, that is the Indian Penal Code 1860, restricts itself the discretion of the judge in the sense that it itself provides for the maximum and the minimum sentences permissible, nevertheless, the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973 requires the sentencing code to provide special reasons under section 354(3) while awarding the sentence of death as to why the alternative punishment of imprisonment for life would not be sufficient. Court should look into the nature of crime, antecedents of the accused, manner of the commission of the crime, etc. This provision puts a restriction on the exercise of discretion of the court. As observed by Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer in Rajendra Prasad versus State of Uttar Pradesh, and I quote, "The special reasons which section 3543 of CRPC speaks of provides reasonableness as envisaged in Article 19 of the Constitution as a relative connotation dependent on a variety of variables, cultural, societal, economical and otherwise. Recently, in the Nirbhaya case, the Supreme Court made it clear that section 354 CRPC specifies the language and contents of the judgment while delivering the judgment in a criminal case. Section 3543 CRPC deals with judgments where conviction is for an offence punishable with death penalty or in the alternative with imprisonment for life. Section 3543 CRPC mandates that when the conviction is for an offence punishable with death or in the alternative with imprisonment for life or imprisonment for a term of years, the judgment shall state the reasons for the sentence awarded, and in the case of sentence of death, the special reasons for such sentence. Now, moving into the discussion of section 2352, section 2352 is in consonance with the modern trends in penology and sentencing procedures. There was no such provision in the old code. It was realized that sentencing is an important stage in the process of administration of criminal justice, as important as the adjudication of guilt. It should be a matter of some anxiety to the court to impose an appropriate punishment on the criminal, and sentencing should therefore receive serious attention of the court. In Mukesh and others versus State for NCT of Delhi and others, also which is popularly known as Nirbhaya case, the Supreme Court observed that section 235 of CRPC deals with the judgment of acquittal or conviction. Under section 235(2), where the accused is convicted, save in the cases of admonition or release on good conduct, the judge shall hear the accused on the question of sentence and then pass sentence in accordance with law. Also, Law Commission in its 41st report has emphasized that it should be imperative upon the court to hear the accused on the question of sentence after conviction but before the imposition of sentence. He should be allowed to make submissions regarding his personal circumstances, social, economical circumstances, etc. Courts by such an exercise can involve themselves into the balancing of aggravating and the mitigating circumstances to award an appropriate sentence. Now, a discussion about 2352 and 3543. The legislative policy is discernible from section 2352 read with section 3543 CRPC that when culpability assumes the proportions of depravity, the court has to give special reasons within the meaning of section 3543 for imposition of death sentence. A legislative policy is that when special reasons do exist, the court has to discharge its constitutional obligations and honor the legislative policy by awarding appropriate sentence, that is the will of the people. In Bachchan Singh versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court observed that as we read section 3543 and 2352 and other related provisions of the CRPC, it is quite clear to us that for making the choice of punishment or for ascertaining the existence or absence of special reasons in that context, the court must pay due regard both to the crime and the criminal. What is the relative weight to be given to the aggravating and mitigating factors depends on the facts and circumstances of the particular case. In a sense, to kill is to be cruel, and therefore all murders are cruel, but such cruelty may vary in its degree of culpability. And it is only when the culpability assumes the proportion of extreme depravity that special reasons can legitimately be said to exist. Coming back to Nirbhaya case, the Supreme Court emphasized upon the fact that the statutory duty to state special reasons under section 3543 CRPC can be meaningfully carried out only if the hearing on sentence under section 2352 is effectively and procedurally fair. Moreover, section 2482 of the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973 asks the magistrate to hear the accused on the question of sentence on finding him guilty. Section 248 inter alia provides that if in any case under this chapter in which a charge has been framed, the magistrate finds the accused not guilty, he shall record an order of acquittal. Where in any case under the chapter the magistrate finds the accused guilty but does not proceed in accordance with the provisions of section 325 or section 360, he shall, after hearing the accused on the question of sentence, pass sentence upon him according to law. Now a little discussion about concurrent and consecutive punishment that we need to do. Now, Section 31 of the CRPC relates to the quantum of punishment that the court has jurisdiction to pass where the accused is convicted for 2 or more offences at one trial. Section 31 inter alia provides that when a person is convicted at one trial of 2 or more offences, the court may, subject to the provisions of Section 71 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, sentence him for such offences to the several punishments prescribed. Therefore, which such court is competent to inflict such punishments when consisting of imprisonment to commence one after the expiration of the other in such order as the court may direct, unless the court directs that such punishments shall run concurrently. Section 31(2) provides that in the case of consecutive sentences, it shall not be necessary for the court by reason only of the aggregate punishment for the several offences being in excess of the punishment which it is competent to inflict on conviction of a single offence to send the offender for trial before a higher court, provided that in no case shall such person be sentenced to imprisonment for longer period than 14 years. The aggregate punishment shall not exceed twice the amount of punishment which the court is competent to inflict for a single offence. Moreover, Section 31(3) CRPC provides that for the purpose of appeal by a convicted person, the aggregate of the consecutive sentences passed against him under this section shall be deemed to be a single sentence. That is, by virtue of Section 31, the sentences run concurrently only if the court so directs. If not so directed, the sentences run consecutively. In Muthuramalingam versus State, the Supreme Court had an interesting question before it: whether consecutive life sentences can be awarded to a convict on being found guilty of a series of murders for which he has been tried in a single trial. In this case, the appellants had allegedly committed several murders and subsequently they were found guilty and sentenced to imprisonment for life. And sentence of imprisonment for life for each one of the murders was directed to run consecutively. The Supreme Court approvingly quoted the following observation made by a 3-judge bench of the court in O.M. Cherian versus State of Kerala. Section 31(1) of CRPC enjoins a further direction by the court to specify the order in which one particular sentence shall commence after the expiration of the other. Difficulties arise when the courts impose sentence of imprisonment for life and also sentences of imprisonment for a fixed term. In such cases, if the court does not direct that the sentences shall run concurrently, then the sentences will run consecutively by operation of Section 31(1) of CRPC. There is no question of the convict first undergoing the sentence of imprisonment for life and thereafter undergoing the rest of the sentences of imprisonment for fixed term, and any such direction would be unworkable. Since sentence of imprisonment for life means jail till the end of normal life of the convict, the sentence of imprisonment of the fixed term has to necessarily run concurrently with life imprisonment. In such case, it will be in order if the sessions judges exercise their discretion in issuing direction for concurrent running of sentences. Likewise, if 2 life sentences are imposed on the convict, necessarily the court has to direct those sentences to run concurrently. In Muhammad Akhtar Hussain versus Assistant Collector of Customs, the Supreme Court observed that the basic rule of thumb over the years has been the so-called single transaction rule for concurrent sentences. If a given transaction continues 2 offences under 2 enactments, generally it is wrong to have consecutive sentences. It is proper and legitimate to have concurrent sentences, but this rule has no application if the transaction relating to offences is not the same or the facts constituting the two offences are quite different. Now, coming to the conclusion, we can say that criminal law adheres in general to the principles of proportionality in prescribing liability according to the culpability of each kind of criminal conduct. It ordinarily allows some significant discretion to the judge in arriving at a sentence that reflects more subtle considerations of culpability that are raised by the special facts of each case. Punishment ought always to fit with the crime. Judge has to take into account the relevant facts and analyze them in view of the restriction laid down under the various provisions under the substantive and procedural criminal law. The discretion that judge exercises in a way is a weak discretion which hedges her ambit of functionality. Therefore, a judge should confine herself in the confines of statutory limitations which aim at ensuring justice in true sense. Thank you for watching this video.